helping to get this catered. So, and thank you to all of our sponsors for enabling this to happen and us to have a good evening here. I want to talk for a few minutes. We've got these cameras rolling and this is streaming, and we've got international partners around the globe that are watching this. I know, Tina, did you say how many different countries have been tuning into this? 12 to 15 different countries have tuned into this over the course of the day. So I think that's an important thing, that, you know, we want this type of efforts to be international in nature. The key is all of us are going to be safer when we work together and share data, share information, so that we can keep people safe. And that's good for the industry at large. It's also true that the more data we get, the better we're going to be able to keep people safe. And so having international collaboration is critical. I'll talk for a second, if it's okay, about the Artemis program and how, in order to create a sustainable program, you know, it was in Space Policy Directive 1 during my time at NASA that this was going to be an international project. We were going to go to the moon. We were going to go sustainably. In other words, this time when we go, we're going to stay. We're going to go with commercial partners, and we've got a lot of those in this room right now. And we're going to go with international partners. And all of that is embedded in this thing called Space Policy Directive 1 that led us to the creation of the Artemis program, which is now the broadest coalition of nations going to the moon, or really in any kind of space endeavor ever. I just looked online just a few days ago. The Artemis Accords, which are, you know, a tool of enabling all of us when we go to the moon to have rules of the road so that we can all stay safe and not interfere and damage each other's efforts. The Artemis Accords now has 33 countries around the globe that have signed. Yeah, that's a big deal. And so when we think about going to the moon, it's about commercial partners, it's about international partners. When we think about keeping people safe, especially on the health and medical side, international data is every bit as important as data that NASA can collect. And that's what this conference is about, commercial data. All of this funds or gives us the information we need to keep people safe. When we think about the Artemis program, in order to make it international, in order to make it collaborative for commercial as well, you know, we thought of it in terms of open architecture, the way we do communications, the way we do data, the way we do environmental control and life support systems, navigation, rendezvous and proximity operations, docking. All of these things are going to be standardized and they're going to be published so that people all over the world can look at them and say, look, this architecture that includes, you know, and different countries would want to use different parts of the architecture, but includes, you know, an SLS rocket, an Orion crew capsule, a gateway in orbit around the moon in this near rectilinear halo orbit where it can stay for long periods of time without using much propulsion at all. And then using that not only as a place to aggregate a landing system to take humans back and forth to the moon, the idea being we can get to any part of the moon anytime we want. That human landing system is not going to be NASA owned and operated. It's going to be commercial in nature. So a lot of the parts of this architecture existed prior to my time at NASA through the Constellation program and certain elements of the Constellation program that were preserved. And then we said, well, if we're going to go to the moon and we're going to go sustainably, we're going to stay, we want to get access to any part of the moon at any time that we want. How do we make that happen? Well, we can aggregate landing systems at the gateway, and those landing systems are not going to be government owned and government operated. In fact, they can be commercial and they can be international. So this is an open architecture system that enables more people to do more than ever before at the moon. And that's really why when we were contemplating this conference and IAASS and all the work that they've done up until this point, having the international piece, the I, of course, in IAASS is international, is critically important. So we want to say thank you to all the international partners who have participated from around the globe. And I know today we had over 150 participants from around the globe that were not only, you know, watching this, but also participating, providing presentations and so forth. So I think I think that's great. It testifies to the success and the importance of a conference like this. So one thing I'd like to do, Donna Roberts is with the ISS National Lab, and she is the deputy chief scientist. Is that what it is? Why don't you come up and share us some of the exciting things that you guys have going on, things that you have coming up that are important, and then we're going to go into a dialogue about the moon. And so we'll have some other guests here come and talk to us about the moon for a few minutes. This is Donna. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thanks. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to this great group here and to participate in this conference. It's been an amazing day and there have been amazing lectures, right? And thanks for our host for having us here. I think our common goal here is to keep humans healthy and safe in space, and to progress in commercialization of space. Our goal at ISS National Lab, we were mandated in 2005 by Congress to manage 50% of the International Space Station. And 50% of the International Space Station is dedicated to doing NASA research. How do we keep humans healthy and safe and move on to the moon and Mars? But the other 50%, Congress realized this is taxpayers' dollars. We've got to take that and devote it back to the taxpayer. And so our interest is in how can we utilize this amazing resource that we have in the International Space Station and bring benefits back to the American people. How can we help promote commercialization of low Earth orbit? As NASA moves on to the moon and Mars, we don't want to lose our position in low Earth orbit. And to do that, we need to build up industry and partnerships with other government agencies and with academia. And so that's what we're trying to promote at ISS National Labs. We've done some amazing work with some of our partners. Some of it you mentioned today, tissues on a chip, having cells on a chip, such as heart cells or liver cells or kidney cells, and using that as, say, avatars for our patients here on Earth. Because in space, when you take that tissue up to space, it ages faster than can be done here on Earth. And so we can test out advanced applications in space using tissue chips. Another example is in space, you don't have the effects of gravity, so you can grow larger tissue cultures, and we can create, the goal is, well, organoids, but the goal is eventually to create whole organs in space. So these are just examples of what we are interested in supporting. And of course, the stuff that we do here, the human research, we know that if we study humans in space, we can take that knowledge that we learn and apply it back to patients here on Earth. And we're very interested in that. And so what I would suggest is that if you're interested in this type of work and the support that we can offer, go to our website, issnationallabs.org, and you can see that we have funding opportunities. There's ones that are open right now, such as advancing technology that could be applicable to this group. We have igniting innovation, where we're looking for cancer moonshot, and also advanced materials. And so I suggest that you take advantage of that. And if there's any questions, please contact me, see me afterwards, get my contact information. And we just really love to support the enthusiasm that we see here at OSU and some of the faculty members that I've spoken with. And we really want to promote and encourage that type of research here. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Open architecture, right? We want to make it available to everybody, and that's what the ISS National Lab is all about. I also want to say it's the ISS National Lab, the International Space Station, talking about the international piece of this. We're talking about an international space station that is operated by 15 different countries, where we've had astronauts from, at this point, I think it's over 20 different countries We think about the experiments that have been done on the International Space Station, whether it's on the National Lab or just directly by NASA. We've had experiments from over 103 different countries. At least that's what it was when I was there. Maybe there's more than that at this point. I'm not sure, but it's a lot. And so this collaboration effort, I think, is important, and the international support of these activities is critical. I would also say it goes beyond the International Space Station. It goes not just to the Artemis program, but we think about astrophysics, heliophysics. We think about planetary science and earth science. All of our missions are now international in nature. And so that's just NASA at large. It is a tool of diplomacy. When Eisenhower contemplated NASA back in the day, 1958, a lot of people wanted NASA to be in the Department of War or in the Army. And Eisenhower said, nope, we're going to make sure that it's a tool of diplomacy. We're going to make sure it's a tool of science, exploration, and discovery. It's not going to be part of what he called the military-industrial complex. It has a whole different mission set. And that's what the International Space Station is all about. We think back to even before the ISS. I don't want to go into all the different activities, but I just want to say this. We're now going to the moon. There's a lot of reasons to go to the moon. There's a lot of reasons medically it's important to go to the moon, and how we're going to be able to do that is important. I'd like to invite up Don Krupp if you're willing to come up. And Don is Deputy Program Manager or Associate Program Manager for the Human Landing System for the moon. So I know there's some folks here from Blue Origin. There's some folks here from SpaceX, so they obviously very interested in what you have to say. And then also Dr. Polk, if you'd be willing to come up. I don't think I need to introduce Dr. Polk, but he's a top doctor at NASA, and he took great care of me when I had COVID during the day. Yeah, not today, back in the day. Yeah, yeah. So anyway, back when nobody knew what this thing was, Dr. Polk came over to my apartment. He was like, "Look, I don't know what you got, but we're gonna find out." And I'm like, "Dr. Polk, if you come over here, you're gonna be exposed and have to isolate, just like I'm isolating." He was like, "We're gonna." He literally came and picked me up at my apartment, took me to the hospital, got me tested. They called it flu A. There was no COVID test in those days, but I was really sick. I don't think it was flu A, just so everybody knows. But at the end of the day, Dr. Polk took his own life into his hands to take care of the NASA administrator, and so I'm eternally grateful for that. But what I'd like to do is just say, maybe you can share some thoughts on, why do we land on the moon? What are the benefits of landing on the moon? And when we think about human physiology on the moon, how is it different than flying in just low Earth orbit? We got chairs over here. We're going to go sit down. And mics.
So our total, if we think back on the Apollo program, we visited the moon multiple times. I kind of, okay, sorry. I kind of look at that as we went camping, right? Our Apollo astronauts went to the surface of the moon. They stayed no more than 3 days. We littered a couple of areas around the equator of the moon, and then we left. Now, did we learn a lot? Absolutely. It changed a lot of the theories about what the moon was and how it was related to the Earth, and we learned a lot about the Earth. But it was a camping trip, right? So what we're doing now with Artemis is going back to stay, right? We want to explore more of the moon. We want to learn, there's so much. And we're going to the South Pole to start with, because it's got water. It's got ice. We know it has ice. And so that is important. Water is heavy to carry up from the Earth to the moon. It's heavy. So if we can use the resources at the moon to do more extended stays, to do more science, to learn more things, that's what Artemis is all about. And the moon is 3.5 to 7 days away from the Earth in the event. If we want to go to Mars, there is so much we have to learn about living away from the earth and being more self-sufficient with our systems in the way we approach things. So there is so much we do not know about the physiology of low, we know quite a bit about microgravity, but the reduced gravity of both the moon and Mars, there's a whole new field there that we need to really kind of contemplate and learn about.
Great explanation. We think about the water ice, it's water to drink, it's oxygen to breathe, it's hydrogen for fuel. Dr. Polk, when you think about human physiology on the moon, there's some benefits to being on the moon that we don't get in low Earth orbit. Can you share some of what those are and how we think about that?
Yeah, we kind of view ISS and the moon in a contiguous mission for us. That
Is his mic working?
ISS is akin to that 6 months transit to Mars. So there are things that I still need to do in that 5 years remaining on ISS to look at treatments for sands and things of that nature. And then on the moon, much as was alluded to before, is using it as a test bed or test ground for technologies and physiology that we will look at for Mars. So the partial gravity of the moon, is it protective for sand? So is that enough gravity to pull fluid down out of the brain, and will that help with some of those things? Will you get enough partial gravity to help with retard some of the bone loss and some of the muscle changes that occur? We think there will be some. It won't be what we see in microgravity, but it won't be as good as Earth. But pinpointing where those things are is helpful for us for Mars, because if there's a countermeasure that'll work in 1/6 G, then it will certainly work in 1/3 G of Mars. And so it's really a test bed for us for what we're going to do in Mars. But also on the technology front, I can't take the entire CVS pharmacy with me to Mars. So we're working with universities right now looking
Did they sponsor this, by the way? We need to work
Yeah.
on that next year.
We're looking at things like 3D printing of medications, which will then change radically how things occur on the ground as well. And you think about third world countries or somebody be able to do that. And so we've been looking at that. We just 3D printed a knee meniscus, like you mentioned, with Redwire about a month ago. And
Redwire's here. That plug wasn't
Yeah.
free. They sponsored this.
yeah,
event.
you plug that. Yeah, see, that's but and I've talked to the folks at Redwire as well about this. But think about how that changes potentially things like organ transplant. In this country right now, I got to wait for somebody to have some kind of tragedy, some motorcyclist who wipes out and has severe brain injury, and now we're going to go harvest their organs. And a family does not want to wish ill on somebody else in order to save their child. And imagine being able to harvest their cells and being able to bioprint an organ that is not going to be rejected because it's made out of someone's own harvested cells that are incubated and grown. That it sounds like science fiction, but it's not that far off when you look at some of the proof of concept technologies that we've done, and especially that Redwire did recently as well on the ISS. And so those types of technologies we're looking at, as you mentioned, how to sustain the human presence, not only on the moon, but then how to look at all of those things to have a sustained presence on Mars. Because when you get to Mars, and I don't know about you, but when I do a home project, I make 3 trips to Home Depot. There's the first time when I think I got everything, and then there's a second time when I, didn't get the part that I needed, and then there's the third time when I actually finished the project. And so when you get to Mars, you don't want to go there and think, oh, we forgot to bring that thing, or wouldn't it be nice? Do you have the Cipro? I thought you had the Cipro, Jim. So, it'd be nice to, if we encounter something, to say, you know what, I need to 3D print the Army Navy retractor because we've got this case coming up, or I need to be able to do this or that. And so looking at those technologies to be fluid and to morph to whatever the mission calls for. Those are a lot of the things that we're looking at and scoping out for what we'll test on the moon and Mars.
Just out of curiosity, and by the way, if anybody here has thoughts or questions, there's a lot of doctors in the audience, and you have opinions. This is your opportunity if you want to take a shot at JD Polk. This is your
Not,
chance.
not shot.
No,
Yeah,
it's, no,
yeah.
bring him your best shot. I did that every day for almost 3 years. So, let's, help me understand is when you think about 3D printing of drugs or pharmaceuticals, is that different than seeding a crystal? Is that a different process or is that the same?
It's similar and I'll do, this is almost sounds trite or too much of a simple example, but if you and I go to the grocery, you can go to the grocery in Tulsa and I can go to the grocery in Washington DC and we can get our Toll House, chocolate chips. And there's a recipe on the back on how to make Toll House cookies and, maybe with a salient difference, but a Toll House cookie in Tulsa is going to taste the same as a Toll House cookie in Washington DC if you and I both followed the recipe. And what we're learning with things like 3D printing of drugs is most of these drugs are about 16 different constituent chemicals and some type of organic pharmacy and chemistry that are put together in a particular way. And so when you look at that as a construct of thinking, all right, if I look at it, I need, I've got to take the flour, the sugar and the salt and the vanilla with me and the chocolate chips. We can't forget those. But it's the same thing. It is if I'm going to make an amoxicillin, I need a carbon, I need a hydrogen, I need these particular parts. And then if you know the recipe and how those things go together, then it's about constructing that matrix, not unlike the crystals that we're doing, but in a particular format and recipe. And that's, it's interesting for us to go through these things. We're working with the FDA. To my surprise, I thought the FDA would be like alarmed that we were going to go look at this. And the FDA wants to partner with us on that because what they're interested in is you want to make sure that the Toll House cookie is 98% Toll House cookie and that it's not 2%.
By the way, Toll House absolutely has to sponsor next
Yeah,
year.
exactly. And so, from a quality perspective, you want, 98% of drug availability and you don't want any toxic chemicals or anything else. So those are the things that we look at.
And do you anticipate, or how do you think about that creating that type of medicine in space? Do you anticipate it being different on the moon than maybe in low Earth orbit? We don't.
Maybe, we don't know. We do know, and Redwire, can probably speak to this better than I can, but how we lay down cells or constituent cells in 3D printing, you don't have the force of gravity mashing those things down. So, pancakes are fluffier in space, and so are evidently knee menisci, but because you don't have gravity, making those cells settle or and as they layer.
Do you have a brand for those pancakes?
No, but we'll get them to
Okay.
sponsor next year as well.
Don, when you think about the human landing system for the moon, obviously right now we've got 2 providers that are on contract developing very different technical capabilities. How do you, as an associate program manager, help foster along the right design and the differences and it's a different type of management than it used to be.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So share a little bit about your thoughts on that.
So you're absolutely right. This is a completely different model for acquiring such complex systems than NASA's ever done before. Traditionally, NASA would do the design and they would write thousands of requirements and then they would go pick a contractor and say, go build this. And then if we didn't like it after we designed it, we'd say, no, go fix this and go do this. And it worked for Saturn, it worked for shuttle, it worked for space station. So it's a great model, but that's not a partnership. That's a dictatorship. NASA dictating exactly what to do. You're right. We have 2 different providers that have completely different approaches to the same set of requirements. With Human Landing System program, what we did was we intentionally left our requirements of what we needed them to do, not how to do it. So for our initial capability, which is going to be our first flight on our Artemis 3, we tried to limit to our functional requirements to like under 30. And that's for 7 days, 2 crews, 7 days on the moon. For our sustained capability, which is, what we really want to get to have longer presence, that system is designed for 4 crew for 28 days, right? And so And both of those, both SpaceX and Blue Origin have those same set of requirements. For the sustain, we went up to about 40 requirements, and then let them innovate, right? Because what we've seen was industry has to be able to innovate to stay ahead of the market, right? And so we have very different very different configurations, but to the same requirements. So from a NASA side, I can help with explaining and coordinating, the requirements, making sure there's no misunderstanding. But also, the great thing about NASA is we have 60 years of human spaceflight experience. And the bad thing about NASA is we have 60 years of flight experience. And sometimes we think we know the best way to do it. And so it's been interesting to see the HLS team kind of be able to morph as we're talking to one provider. We work this way and we try to fit their culture and their approach. And when we talk to our second provider, we try to morph to their corporate culture and their design approach. And so that's how we've been trying to manage this, is recognize that both of those providers have a lot of good things to bring to this design. They're showing us things and they're asking good questions. And together we're making sure that both of those systems are ready to transport the crew to the lunar surface.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but the open architecture enables any provider to integrate with the gateway. Is that right?
I believe so. I'm more focused on human landing system, but yes, Gateway is looking at those visiting vehicle standards, for the docking standards for other countries to possibly use that architecture and use the Gateway.
Okay, awesome. Well, fantastic. So let's see, Dr. Polk, when we think about the human landing systems that Don is helping to produce, we land on the moon. We're going to have humans on the surface of the moon. Some of those humans will be NASA astronauts. Some of them may not be NASA astronauts. We got to keep them all safe. We think about the regolith, which is a whole different dynamic. How do you think about the regolith and how it affects the human physiology and that kind of thing?
Well, it's, we've done a lot of studies on the regolith and the dust, and of course, the spicules and the sharp edges of that structure and its penetrance in the lungs, and those are always a risk. But we've gotten really smart on the ISS and in other places on how to filter the air. But we can also use it to our advantage in that the regolith could also be a substrate for, we have the CHAPIA right now that we've used with 3D printing again, where we used simulant to a Mars regolith to actually 3D print the habitat that astronauts are staying in at JSC. And so could you use that lunar regolith as a building or construct material? And it may help you with radiation protection and other things of that nature. So yeah, you want to look at it both as its hazard, for its own hazard, for certainly inhalation hazard when we have it in the vehicle, and how we're going to scrub that to make sure that the crew stays safe. But we also look at it on the other side of is, can we get that particular thing that we've always looked at as a potential risk now as to work for us as a protection for the crew as well. So it's on both sides.
One of the areas that Oklahoma State University has been very involved in over the years is dosimeters and understanding the radiation environment. When we think about the radiation environment, in deep space, you get outside the Van Allen radiation belt, it's entirely different. And then when you get to the surface of the moon, it's different again. Tell us how do you, as a flight surgeon, think about those things?
Well, we did a huge study with the national academies, looking at all the evidence base and data on radiation. Dave Francisco, was our standards manager, was involved in that heavily. And we looked at and challenged a lot of the assumptions. So we made a lot of assumptions in the past based on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. That was really about the only data we had of severe radiation exposures. And we also had quality factors in there. And we were very conservative initially on where we would set those ranges. And in fact, our radiation standard was about 60% more conservative than our international partners. And so we went and back and looked at all of that data, convened radiation experts from around the country with the national academies, and really took a hard look at that standard. And one of the things that we had done before was we treated male and female astronauts differently. because females had a higher risk for radiation exposure due to both breast and ovaries. And we looked at that to see, can we nominalize or across the two sexes so that we didn't unfairly penalize our female astronauts? Because if we had kept the old standard, we might have to call it the ART program instead of the Artemis program, because I would severely limit the number of female astronauts that would be able to go to the moon.
For those who aren't aware, Artemis is the twin sister of Apollo in Greek mythology. She was the goddess of the moon. The program is named after the fact that we are now, in fact, going to send women to the moon, which we've never done before. And so he's saying, instead of the Artemis program, without the right mitigations, we'd have the ART program.
It would have changed. And so we've set a new radiation standard, and we are still looking at multiple different countermeasures, but we've been looking at that in a very holistic fashion to both make sure that we were not being too conservative, but still protecting our astronauts, but also setting up the same ability for male and female across the board. Our standard and the work that the National Academy has done is online. You can download it at any point in time. All of those things are available for anybody to go look at. And for us, it's always, all of our standards are living standards. As we get more data, and this is why it's important to have more data on the commercial spaceflight side as well. As we get more data that informs us and the evidence base, we are constantly revising and updating those standards.
Awesome. Don, when we think about the human landing systems for the moon, obviously there's an intersection of engineering and life support and environmental control, life support systems. How is NASA organized around that intersection? Do you have medical people that are involved in the engineering process, engineers involved in the medical how does that work, and how does that apply to the contractors themselves?
Okay, so great question. Yes, we do have folks across the agency. A human landing system program is drawing on the best and brightest across all of the agency to make sure that we have the right people looking at the right things. We also have a very robust contract clause that allows NASA to look at whatever data we want to from each of the providers. It's based on our insight, our risk-based insight. And so if NASA identifies or one of our providers identifies a risk, NASA will shift some resources to go dig deeper, do a little bit more understanding, and possibly provide some advice, some suggestions for the providers to take a look at. So yes, we do have all of our engineers looking at all the various subsystems, the ECLS system that you mentioned, avionics, communication, GNC, all of those things. We also have our Health and Medical Technical Authority, who has been a wonderful partner with the program. We actually have a very good relationship with our chief engineer, chief safety officer, and chief health and medical officer, really understanding the model that we're in and making sure that they are comfortable with the approaches that we're taking to make sure that our astronauts and the crew working on the vehicles are all safe.
Awesome. Dr. Polk, you're one of the independent technical authorities, which of course, as the NASA administrator, was a tremendous resource to me because you get to speak as though you speak for no one except for yourself, in essence, and give me just your unvarnished opinion. Tell us, for the audience, there's a lot of people here who don't understand or don't know what an independent technical authority is and how that came into be and how it relates to keeping people safe.
Yeah, the Independent Technical Authority started after Columbia and was based off a Navy program on looking at independent assessments separate from the program managers. So the program managers obviously try to maintain an independence at all possible, but they have pressures of cost and schedule that they all are always weighing. And even though they may not think that may not influence their decision making, we want to make sure that we look at it independently on a particular issue. And there may be times where we will go, and there are times right now where the different tech authorities will challenge something that the program is working on, whether that's the Commercial Crew Program, ISS program, Artemis, or what have you. And really what you want is you want folks that are deeply intelligent and educated on a particular area. And the program can't be an expert in everything. And what we've tried to do, and hopefully very successfully, is instead of, we don't want it to be where the tech authorities are grading your homework. We don't want to say, oh, sorry, wrong rock. You didn't do it right. We don't like it. Send it back. What we have tried to do, certainly in our tech authority and also with engineering and safety as well, is to first educate. All right, here's why this issue is important to us. Here's why, from our perspective, that we're looking at it this way. And then also try to help the program get to a solution set and bring them answers on how to work with a vendor or et cetera on saying, hey, you know what? I like what they're designing here. If we could just tweak it here a little bit, then that would make, reduce our risk by 10% or 20%. And really, I think instead of grading somebody's homework, it's that inform and educate aspect that has really been a game changer for us. Like we said, all of our standards, all of our tech sheets, all of those things are out in the open right now. And a lot of it is just a conversation. We have a lot of conversations with the vendors that we didn't have before. And so bringing that to the administrator and occasionally what we do is, we try to work with the program and at the lowest level, our CHIPOs and the tech authorities at the lowest level work with the program to go back and forth and embed with the vendor whenever possible and try to educate the vendors. What you don't want to do is you don't want to have them bend metal and then say, oh, sorry, you did it wrong. We want to educate them in the very beginning before they bend metal so that you are not costing the program or wasting their time and trying to maintain cost and schedule while reducing risk at the same time. But it's really, instead of getting in the role of being the person that actually turned the wrench, is to get in the role of almost being the academic professor of teaching people why we have a particular standard the way it is, but also giving them free rein to design around that. Because as you mentioned before, that the landers are vastly different. They don't look the same, they don't act the same, they're not the same pressures, et cetera. But despite that, they still meet the standards that the tech authorities have laid out that were, hey, these things are kind of biblical. You can design it any way you want, but don't cross this line because this is kind of biblical to keep the person safe. And they've done a great job with that.
So that's, Gabe, did you have a question in the back, or
He was telling me I'm talking too long.
are we, okay, are we out of time? Is that the deal? Okay, well, let's do this. First of all, I want to say the Independent Technical Authority is a tremendously valuable resource to whoever the NASA administrator is. The idea that you have, whether it's engineers or safety people or medical people embedded in a program that are working on that program, and cost and schedule is a part of that program, but they don't report up through the chain of command of that program. No offense to the great associate program manager here. But at the end of the day, they are independent so that they can provide guidance and feedback without fear of retribution. And ultimately, if they need to bring an issue to the NASA administrator apart from, the chain of command, that can be done, which of course came from the Columbia Accident Investigation Board. So a lot of these things, they're quite frankly written in blood. And a lot of people lost their lives in order to bring us these standards that are keeping us even more safe going forward. So I just want to say thank you to Don Krupp for coming all the way from the Marshall Space Flight Center, and Dr. Polk, thank you for coming all the way from Washington, D.C. Not that you were, sad to leave Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
So anyway, thank you all, and it's great to be here. Thank you to the Tulsa Air and Space Museum, Oklahoma State University for helping put together this great evening. So thank you all so much.